Okay, so next let's go to the actual configuration part now. Which, looking at our diagram, let's see where we can better off do this. Okay, I'm gonna do it on switch 1. And what I'm gonna do is the following. So that is VLAN 11. We're gonna consider VLAN 11 to be the primary VLAN. We're gonna have VLAN 11, primary VLAN to be 11. Then we're gonna define secondary VLANs as follows. We're gonna have VLAN, let's say 20, to be of type isolated, and VLAN of 30 to be of type community. So let's do that first step. So switch 1. Let's make sure I have no ports in the array disabled state. So first we say we verify in which VTP version we run. Is version 2, which means to be able to run private VLANs, we have to change it to transparent. Let's confirm that. If we say VLAN 11 and we say primary VLAN, it should give an error message. Private VLAN primary. There we go. This is only because I'm running VTP version 2. So let's say VTP mode transparent. So let's define the secondary VLANs. Let's make sure those 20 and 30 VLANs, they don't exist. Show VLAN brief 20 and 30, and they don't. So we first define the secondary VLANs. Conf T, and we say VLAN 20. We say private VLAN of type isolated. Exit. VLAN 30, private VLAN of type community. Exit. And VLAN 11, and we say private VLAN of type primary, and we associate the secondary VLANs to the primary VLAN because, as I stated, you may have multiple secondary VLANs and multiple primary VLANs, and there has to be an association in between. So we say private VLAN association, and we said 20 and 30. So we bind the secondary VLANs to the primary VLAN. Now if we say show VLAN private VLAN, we should see the configuration successfully being done. And there we go. We see that the primary VLAN is 11. And we have the secondary VLAN of 20 associated to 11, and that's of type isolated. And the community VLAN of 30 associated with VLAN 11. So the first step has been done. Configure the VLAN types and associate the secondary VLANs with the primary VLAN. Now next what we're going to do is the following. We're going to take a step one more because I have only 2 hosts in there. So I'm going to divide the switch into 2 entities. It's going to be both a layer 2 switch and a layer 3 switch. So I'm going to make it a layer 3 switch. I'm going to go in VLAN 11, and I'm going to add on VLAN 11 an IP address on the switch to be 10.10.11 dot, let's say 9. And I'm going to behave as I stated, like, for example, to make it simple, to make it easier to visualize, is like the SVI of switch 1 in VLAN 11. The SVI 11 of switch 1 is like it's going to be connected to switch 1 physically, because I'm going to make that SVI to be my promiscuous port. I'm going to pretend that's going to be my default gateway promiscuous port. I'm going to pretend that's going to be my default gateway in the network. So I'm going to make the SVI of switch 1 and that VLAN to be the promiscuous port. And initially, I'm going to put both port FA105 and FA101 in the isolated VLAN, which means they're not going to be able to speak in between because they are in the isolated VLAN, but they are going to be able to speak with the promiscuous port. And then I'm going to change that configuration to put both of them in the community VLAN, which means at that point they're going to be able to speak in between and also with the promiscuous port. And the last is going to be that I'm going to make one port to be in the community VLAN and one in the isolated, to confirm what I said before. So this port is going to be in the community VLAN. This port is going to be in the isolated VLAN, which means they're not going to be able to speak in between because it's not possible to speak between isolated and community. They're not going to be able to speak in between. But both of them are going to be able to speak with the promiscuous port. So let's take those three steps one by one. So first of all, let's make switch 1 to be a member of that VLAN. Show run interface VLAN 11. IP address 10.10.11.9 0. No shutdown, and make this a promiscuous port. Private VLAN mapping, and I'm going to add both secondary VLANs, which means I'm going to allow both the isolated VLAN and the community VLAN to speak with the promiscuous port. Now, this is by default a promiscuous port because I've configured the primary VLAN in there, the SVI in the primary VLAN, which means it's by default promiscuous. I just have to tell I just have to tell the switch who can speak with the promiscuous port, which secondary VLANs. Because just like in prison, the inmates can speak with the guardian only if the guardian so chooses to. So if I'm going to put in there just private VLAN 20, it means that only VLAN 20 can communicate with the promiscuous port. So it's not by default that everybody can communicate with the promiscuous port. It's only if you allow all secondary VLANs to speak with a promiscuous port. Like in prison, the guardian is gonna speak with the inmates only if he so chooses to, right? Okay. Then let's go, and as I said initially, let's put both of these ports, 105 and 101, in the isolated VLAN, which should be VLAN 20. And there we go. VLAN 20. So let's go and show run interface FA105. Conf T. And to keep it simple, let's say default that interface. Well, I'm going to lose the IP addresses. Let me just configure it. So pretty much everything which is in there should go away, because I'm going to say switch port mode private VLAN of type host, because I have a host connected in there. Command rejected because of the voice VLAN. So no switch port makes sense, voice VLAN. So I'm going to say switch port mode private VLAN host, because this is going to be, it's a host connected out there. It's not a promiscuous port. It's not a default gateway. And then I say this host is a member of which VLAN? Switch port private VLAN host association. This is going to be in VLAN 20. (11 to 20). So you go on the port facing PCA. You tell him is it runs in private VLAN host mode, which means switch port mode access command is gone now because I'm not a access port mode. I'm a private VLAN host access port mode. And then, okay, so since I'm a host, it means I have to be in the isolated VLAN or community VLAN. So we say then switch port private VLAN, host association, and you put in there the primary VLAN and the secondary VLAN again. And likewise on port FA01, which is towards router 1, I'm going to put the same two commands. Because initially I want both of them to be in the isolated VLAN. That is correct. I gotta remove source guard, include binding. It's not supported because source guard doesn't support the secondary VLANs, so let's put in there. Interface FA101. And finally, there we go. So now if we say show VLAN private VLAN, we should see there go that both ports 1 and 5 are a member of the isolated VLAN now. And if we say show interfaces FA101 switch port, it is going to show you that it runs in private VLAN mode. It runs in private VLAN host mode. In there, it shows in there, and it tells you, okay, and then I'm running in. I'm running in VLAN 20. That's the secondary VLAN, and I'm associated to VLAN 11, the primary VLAN. And you also see that in here as well. So now, based on this, as I stated, then router 1 should not be able to communicate with PCA. Both of them are in the isolated VLAN. But both of them should be able to speak with the SVI of switch 1, which is the promiscuous port. Let's confirm router 1 cannot ping PCA, but can ping the promiscuous port. Ping 10, 10, 11, 100. Doesn't work. And if we say ping 10, 10, 11, 9, which is switch 1, the promiscuous port, it should work. Let's make sure that, well, FA101 was put into a disabled state. Why is that? Let's look again. Well, because of that. Let's remove storm control, right? No this. And let's shut, no shut. Let's make sure the port is back recovered. Status error disabled. Okay. Now let's again ping from router 1 to PCA. It should not work because both of them are in the isolated VLAN. But to switch 1, the promiscuous port should work. And there we go. Likewise, PCA should not be able to speak with router 1 because both of them are in the isolated port. But PCA should be able to speak with switch 1, which is the promiscuous port. And there we go. And to confirm that again, I cannot speak with router 1. And as expected. Now I'm going to change this around. I'm going to leave, let's say, PCA to be in the isolated VLAN and put router 1 in the community VLAN, which means likewise they cannot speak in between, but they can speak with the promiscuous port as well. So let's put router 1 in the community VLAN now. We go on switch 1 on port 1, and we just change one command, which is I'm still in private VLAN host mode, but I'm going to be in the community VLAN, which is VLAN 30. So now show VLAN private VLAN. Now router 1 is in the community VLAN. Let's confirm router 1 cannot ping switch PCA again. And doesn't work, but router 1 can ping the promiscuous port. And there we go, it worked. And likewise, of course, I haven't changed anything on PCA. PCA should be able to ping the promiscuous port, which is switch 1. And there we go, it works, but it should not be able to ping router 1. 10, 10, 11, that's myself, right? 10, 10, 1, 11, 1, that's router 1. Now the final step is going to be to put both of them in the community VLAN, both this port and this port to be in the community VLAN, which means they're going to be able to speak in between because they are members of the same community. And also, of course, with the promiscuous port, which is switches 1 SVIs. Switch 1's SVI. So let's go on also on switch 1 and put also PCA into the community VLAN. Switch port private VLAN. Host association 11 to 30. So now show VLAN private VLAN. Both of them are a member of the community VLAN, which means that router 1 and PCA should be able to speak one to another finally. And there we go, it worked. And also, of course, with the promiscuous port, nothing changed. There we go. And also, if we go on PCA, it should be able to ping router 1. And there we go. Now to configure the private VLAN edge functionality, I'm going to remove private VLAN configuration from those ports. I'm going to shut down the SVI of switch 1, get back to the initial state. And initially, I'm going to configure PCA, this port and this port on the switch as protected, which means PCA should not be able to speak with router 1. Because private VLAN edge disallows traffic between protected ports. So let's go on switch 1. Remove the private VLAN configuration from those two ports. Put those ports back to the show run interface FA101. Shut down, no this. But it worked before, it should work after as well. No this. So remove private VLAN. I can put back port security, no problem. And make this back a mode access VLAN 11. So put this back to VLAN 11. But of course, to be able to do that, let's go to VLAN 11 and make it back a regular port. VLAN 11, no private VLAN primary. Exit. So interface FA101, switch port mode access, switch port access VLAN 11, and switch port security back to what it was, and no shut. So the port facing router 1, it's a regular port in VLAN 11. Of course, with port security configured, doesn't matter, as it was before. And I'm going to do the same for the port face for the port connected to PCA. So I'm going to say switch port mode access, switch port access VLAN 11, and switch port voice VLAN 1 as it was initially. So show run interface FA105. Now it's a regular configuration mode active VLAN 11. This command is useless now, but let's remove it. And let's remove the SVI from switch 1. And now I'm back in the as I was before I enabled private VLANs, and let's make sure that PCA and router 1 can communicate one to another. So ping 10, 10, 11, 100. And here we go, they can. As I said, I'm going to make both this port of FA105 and FA101 as protected ports, which means router 1 and PCA can no longer speak one to another. So I'm going to say to switch 1, I'm going to say conft interface range FA101 and FA105 switch port protected. Let's verify the private VLAN edge configuration. If we say show interfaces FA101 switch port, it shows up as a protected port, true. Likewise, 105 shows up as a protected port, which means all traffic in between should be dropped. And there we go again, it doesn't work. But as we stated, only traffic between protected ports is not going to work, because it makes sense. Only between protected ports is not going to work, which means I'm going to leave port FA101 to be protected, and port FA105 I'm going to remove the protected state, which means traffic is going to work again, because it's going to be switched between a protected port and a regular port, and it's going to be allowed. So let's go on FA105. On port facing the PCA, remove that capability. Say no switch port protected. So now show interfaces FA105 switch port. Should no longer be a protected port. And it's not, it's false. But a port facing router 1 should be a protected port still. And it is. But now traffic between a protected port and a regular port, so non-protected, which is the default, it's going to be allowed. And there we go, I can ping again PCA.